Well, it's 2 p.m. Central African time, and thank you so much for choosing Market View this Tuesday afternoon. Now, stay with me over the next half an hour as we track developments around the nation's economy and how it feeds into the overall sustainable economic growth of the country. Coming up on the show today, I'm in conversation with Meli Hlanze. He is the Executive Director of the Copyrights and Neighboring Rights Society. We want to look at the work they are doing in ensuring that local artists' intellectual property is indeed protected and that the artist is paid their dues. Now, this conversation is in the backdrop of a concern which is raised by the National Arts and Culture Council regarding artists not being paid their royalties. And indeed, it is not a new worry. Intellectual property remains one of the issues that the creative industry continues to grapple with. But we will get to the bottom of it and discuss smart solutions with Meli Hlanze. We'll wrap things up with our economist, Sanele Sibia, taking us through the latest financials. But now, let's start the show with business news. Right, for our first story, the United States of America Embassy in Eswatini says there is still a lot of opportunities for export to the United States of America for local businesses under the African Growth Opportunity Act, which is at the cornerstone of the U.S. economic engagement with the countries in Africa. Now, this was said by the economic officer Christopher Wall during an interview to determine how Emaswati have benefited under the act.
During his speech from the throne when opening Parliament this year, His Majesty King Mswati III mandated the National Trade and Facilitation Committee to turn Eswatini into a trade hub. In order for this to come into fruition, there is a need for all stakeholders to play their part. We have asked the American Embassy on how local businesses are benefiting from the African Growth Opportunity Act.
The idea behind it was that Congress passed a law to enable African countries to compete on a better than level playing field with countries from around the world. And the way that they did this was by offering tariff-free access for a wide range of goods. Over 6,700 product categories are able to enter the United States without paying any tariff rates whatsoever. What this allows exporters from Eswatini to do is to ship their products at a rate that's cost-effective for them, opening one of the largest consumer markets in the world to Emaswati businesses. So some of the areas that businesses in Eswatini have been very successful in exporting to the U.S. are in sugar, where the Eswatini Sugar Association fills its quota to the U.S. every single year. It's an extremely profitable market for them, so that's been a real success. Another area is in textiles, where large textile manufacturers here and apparel manufacturers are able to ship to the U.S. And then the third area, which I think is growing and is probably growing the most for small and medium-sized enterprises, is in food and value-added agriculture. So we've had a couple of great successes where the embassy, through its USAID Africa Trade and Investment Program, has been able to assist smaller businesses to become exporters who hadn't been exporters before.
The embassy's economic officer also explained what opportunities are still available under the Act.
It's a real challenge, right? Because, of course, shipping to the United States is not a small undertaking. You need to have a product that is able to be sold on the scale that's necessary, and that's unique enough to sort of break into the U.S. market. So I think given the strength of agriculture in this country, an area where I would see small and medium-sized enterprises continuing to be successful is in the sort of prepared and specialty food sector. I think that the advantage there is that you're not trying to ship a commodity like fruit or vegetables. You've created a real product with a real brand identity, and that makes it something that's worth shipping to the United States, something that American consumers really get excited by.
The Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries Eswatini says they are engaging the youth in business to take advantage of the opportunities under the Act. For Market View, Nelson Dlangamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa, Ezulwini.
The Registrar of Intellectual Property, Dr. Celucolo Dludlu, says the conversation of paying royalties has begun as the Eswatini Copyright and neighboring societies doing consultations on tariffs. Now, the registrar was responding to what they are doing to ensure that local artists, including musicians, are paid their royalties.
In the year 2018, the Copyright Act was passed into law. However, local artists have not yet reaped the benefits of the act, like being paid royalties if their content is played in local media and during events, amongst other avenues. The Registrar of Intellectual Property, Dr. Celucolo Dludlu, says they are working tirelessly to put the act into motion.
Part of my intellectual property, we have a group we call copyright. It usually protects, it mainly protects rather, literary works. It could be your music, it could be your writings, it could be your drawings. So for that, it is protected under the Copyright Act of 2018. That act establishes two main things. One is the enforcement of copyright, the infringement of copyright. There is enforcement provisions for that. And then the second one, it's the establishment of a copyright society. The copyright society will look mainly at the determination, collection and distribution of royalties to the rightful owners. The society, it will look at how copyright is used, in public broadcasts. It will look at how events, in public events, use copyright and establish those licenses and tariffs for use of copyright in industry. We are trying to get people to respect copyright, but one element that we cannot leave behind is the element of enforcement. For those who don't want to follow the law, the statute provides us with an option to prosecute those who infringe, up to a fine of up to 20,000 for infringement of copyright, for instance, or 3 years in jail.
Responding to why it has taken this long as the act was passed in 2018, this is what he said.
It's one of the acts that were pending in Parliament for a long time. I remember a draft in early 2000s. It finally passed in 2018, but it has been there for a while because there was that outcry to say, from artists to say our work is being used, but we are not remunerated. So it took a while to get to that. I'm pleased to report that our Copyright Act is one of the progressive acts, when you look at other jurisdictions. So the big fines there, the institutional arrangements of having a copyright society to look into the issue of the proper payments of copyright. So it may have taken a while, but at least we have, I think, a robust system for the remuneration of the use of copyright works in public.
The Chief Executive Officer of Eswatini National Council of Arts and Culture, Stanley Dlamini, says they are aware that the Eswatini Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society is doing a tariff benchmarking to determine how local artists will be paid. For Market View, Nelson Dlangamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa, Mbabane.
It's 9 minutes after 2. We'll go for a net break. We speak to Meli Hlanze after the break.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Oh, welcome back. The Executive Director of the Eswatini Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society, Melihlanze, says since taking office they have done a lot to ensure that local artists are paid their dues. Now, the Executive Director said this in response to the National Arts and Culture Council concern, saying that they hope this matter could be given urgency. Let's talk to Melihlanze regarding this matter. I'm sorry, I took a moment there because I'm taking it in myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to take it for granted, Meli, as I introduce you to the program. Welcome to the program once again.
Thank you.
I don't want to take it for granted that people understand what intellectual property means. So perhaps we would begin on defining what IP is and why it's important.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Ngumalo, for having us. So, intellectual property, if I'm to summarize it, it happens as a result of the creation of one's intellect.
Right.
So, if you think of anything, for example, if you draw images, you have what we call intellectual property.
Right.
It's a right that every creator has, and there are different kinds of intellectual property.
Okay.
And I think the one that is more directed towards our organization is copyright.
Okay.
So copyright is a subset of intellectual property that focuses on giving an author, a composer, and a creator exclusive rights, in essence. You know, these are economic rights that help them to make money from their creations, and these are also moral rights that protect their integrity and the paternity of their creations.
Yeah.
And it's a human right. That's another thing that people don't get.
Yeah.
It's actually part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It's a human right.
It's a human right.
So, my interpretation of this whole thing, you'll tell me if I've hit a big tangent there. I'm still very much in the lines of what we're discussing. I look at intellectual rights, and I look at South Africa, for instance, and I was very, very shocked last year to see, you know, a news clip where they were saying they're still grappling, the creative industry is still grappling with the intellectual property, particularly copyright issues like you have alluded. And it concerns me because I have looked at South Africa as the bar of maybe if our artists could get paid as South African artists. My question then becomes, in the local sector, our local artists, for the longest time, they've also complained. I mean, we just saw Mshigishi appearing on a recent podcast saying that, please don't say I'm a legend because I don't feel it in my pockets. You know, I've worked so hard, but yet I feel like my work has not really been protected and commercialized like that. Where does your job come in to making sure that people like Mshigishi and the emerging artists really eat from their work?
Yeah. No, I think you're very right. I think creativity in general is something that has often been looked down on because it's not one of the traditional professions that are embraced in our country. Yet if you look the world over, the creative economy is, if you look at any leading economy in the world, creative economy is usually top 3 contributors to the economy. UNESCO, according to UNESCO, they actually say the creative economy is the biggest employer of people aged between 15 and 29 than any other. So we are really talking about something that's substantial and that can have a great contribution to any economy. Locally, we have fallen behind in terms of what the rest of the world was doing. But we do have certain interventions in place that the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini has put in place. For example, the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, which is the act that makes the provision for the establishment of our organization, the Eswatini Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society. And the act in and of itself provides for the adequate protection. If you go through the act, it clearly states ukuthi uma ungumqambi wetingoma or umbhali wetincwadzi, anyone lo wakha i-copyright, so long as the copyright yakho eligible, ikhona le eligibility criteria that's there in the act, but so long as it's eligible, you are granted protection, which means you have lama exclusive rights to deny someone else the right to use or exploit your work.
Okay.
But where we come in is as what you call a collection management organization, a CMO. And our job is to then commercialize the usage of copyright works.
Okay.
So ours is not necessarily to restrict people from using, but to actually encourage people to use, but to use it while fairly compensating the creators of lemisebent. So uma ngingabekisa nje, a large part of what we are meant to do and are in the process of doing is coming up with different rates or tariffs,
okay,
which the different users can use to pay for a copyright, whether it's broadcasters, whether it's entertainment venues, whether it's anyone who uses copyright and not just music, copyright in general. We come up with licensing schemes for how they can pay to use the copyright and make sure there's a fair distribution of those royalties to the respective authors or rights holders.
You've clearly said that the Act provides for the adequate protection, and I'm happy that as the CMO, you are looking at particularly the commercialization of the intellectual property of all these great artists, this creative industry that we have in Eswatini. I think for the artists listening at home, their question then becomes, how soon can we expect this to be put in place, to be implemented?
It's a question that I'd also ask if I was an artist. So I always understand when artists or any stakeholder asks how soon.
Yeah.
But it's hard to answer that question without appreciating how far we still need to go.
Okay.
So to get to a point whereby we can distribute royalties, there's so many other milestones that we need to hit.
Okay.
One of those, as I've mentioned, is for us to draft these tariffs that the different stakeholders will be using. The second is for have those engagements with stakeholders for them to accept the tariffs.
Artists themselves.
The users more so.
The users.
Because the users are the ones that are paying.
Okay,
we
so
need
that's
to
me and you.
Exactly.
Right.
We need to get everybody on board to say, okay, as a restaurant, for example, who's using background music, I am happy with what you're proposing.
Okay.
As a festival that's using music, I'm happy with what you're proposing. As a broadcaster that's using music, I'm happy. And there's so many other different industries, whether in hospitality or tourism or so forth. Anyone who uses music or largely copyright, for example, even the use of books in the education sector. The education sector is another user. So once we have all these tariffs in place, and we've engaged the relative, the relevant stakeholders, and they say we're happy, then we know that okay, we now have these that we can go with. Second part is then compliance. Now we need to enforce and make sure that everybody complies, right? And once we hit that certain target of compliance and we're collecting revenue, the last mile is then the distribution. But then to distribution, there's also certain things that artists need to look at or look into. Because uma mina nawe sinengoma, and then when we are humble, we palisa, because part of what will need to happen is that artists will need to be members of the society so that the society can be able to pay them those royalties. So you come to us, we are palisa as a member, we are palisa your works, which is if you're a musician, your music, and we look at it and we're happy, and there's a particular song that goes on to earn X emalangeni. Then the question becomes, uma sitakunika wena, wena nalo labanye lo sebende nabo kule ngoma naso indlela ezivumelwana
Producer.
exactly
Right, okay.
It's what we call split sheets in the music industry. Do we have all the right split sheets in place to make sure that the distributions are accurate?
Fairly as well.
Otherwise, what we do, we then invite disputes where we pay out money to you, and then a few months or years later, someone pops up and say, "No, I was in the studio, mabaya kalengomale, but I was never credited in the split sheets, so I need to be paid as well," which is something that you've seen as well in neighboring countries like South Africa. So we also need to get that part right as a music industry. We credit one another, have the right agreements in place so that the distributions can be accurate. But also just to say, though I can't say when distributions will happen, if you look at most CMOs around the world, upon establishment or formation, they take on average 3 to 5 years to make their first distribution.
You guys have been?
We have been in existence since September 2023, when we were launched by the Honorable Minister of Commerce.
So 2028 could be the time where we expect something really tangible.
I can't commit. Like for us, we are trying to expedite the process. We would like for it to be as soon as possible, but the reality is it does take time.
And we're a small economy, so expediting the process could be fairly easier than compared to the other economies. Mr. Hlanze, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Really appreciate your insights on intellectual property, draft of tariffs, have engagements with stakeholders, compliance, and distribution. You did mention that if you look at other economies, it's people from the 15 years and
15 to 29,
and we are a young economy as Eswatini. So we do hope that the creative industry will soon eat off of their intellectual property, and indeed the overall economic growth of the country will benefit, as the demographic dividend does show that 15 to 29 is where it's at currently in Eswatini. Let's go for a break. We speak to Mr. Sbia after the break.
sabatandi ukuthi njengalokhu sivile sive sikhulume.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Renewal of TV licenses for 2024 is now open. Here is a quick reminder. A viewer's TV license costs 180 emalangeni per device. Other accessories such as decoders and set-top box cost 50 emalangeni per device. For traders and repairers, TV license costs 300 emalangeni per business area. And now, to pay your TV license, use these following methods. You can use MTN Mobile Money with the number 76222000 or dial *007 *3 *7#, or you can use Eswatini Imali. And you can pay our TV license at any post office in the country. Another option is you can use any Nedbank branch using our TV license account number 119900430037. Don't forget, when paying for your viewer's TV license, reference with your PIN at all times. And when paying for a retailer TV license, reference with your TIN at all times. For more information, call us on 7802-4543 or 34050163 or 34020879. And you can send us a WhatsApp message on 762222000.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience in the kingdom.
It's 26 minutes after 2. Welcome back to the program. We'll quickly just connect with Mr. Sanele Sbiya, our economist, to look at today's financial markets. Mr. Sbiya, thank you so much for joining us on the program again today. Let's look at today's financial markets. I want us to look at the top U.S. markets first. Trading higher, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Trading higher again is the Nasdaq Composite Index, as well as the S&P 500 Index. What has impacted those numbers?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. So when you look at the US stock markets, you will see that markets are now trying to price in the fact that one of the blue chip makers has actually signed in an agreement to actually move plants to the US. So that is why you are seeing the Nasdaq trading a bit higher. While when you're looking at the rest of the markets, you will see that they are still pricing in the fact that we have inflation data coming out this week, and markets have actually repriced their interest rate expectation hike to a bit later in the year, and also the number of expected cuts have also been priced downwards. So that's why we are seeing the movements that we are seeing in the markets in the US.
Okay, let's quickly look into gold. We've heard that the prices rather they have hit a fresh high, and we're hearing that it is sustained by some of the geopolitical tensions and monetary easing hopes. What does this tell us?
What this tells us is, yes, markets are somehow repricing and trying to push back the expectations of an interest rate cut. So then that means markets now are shifted towards metals, and that is actually quite emblematic. If you look at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, it's really rallying. But when you look at what is making that market move at present, it is actually the materials, the metals, which is gold amongst one of those. And then when you couple that with the weaker dollar in the current days, you will see that investors are shifting their money more towards metals as a way of hedging compared to just keeping the money in stocks when you are now pricing back Lama expectations of interest rate cuts.
I want us to look at Brent crude oil. We are hearing many concerns around the world regarding fuel prices still driving inflation, but we're being told not to panic. Should we panic or should we not? What is really impacting these fuel costs?
So at the moment, what is happening is mostly the Gaza-Israel type of conflict that we are seeing happening in that region. What the world was hoping for was actually a full-on ceasefire, but what we have seen Israel saying and coming out of the meeting saying, we are just moving our troops so we can go and recuperate, right? So that now takes away the hopes of a full-on ceasefire within that region. And when you recall, just last week, Israel bombed an Iranian embassy in Syria. So all of those things, when you look at the movements in that geopolitical front, you will see it causes us really to be in a very unstable environment in the Middle East now, with embassies being bombed and all of that. That means the entire region might move into more instability. So that is why we are seeing that rallying. And then at the same time, OPEC countries have not changed their their supply of oil. Yeah.
I know we've run out of time, but we would be very remiss not to discuss today's Forex. How is the Lilangeni posited today?
So today, when you look at against all the major currencies that we track, the dollar, the euro, and the Japanese yen, you will see that our Langen is actually holding strong at 18.50 to the dollar and at 21.20 to the euro, which means our currency is becoming relatively stronger compared to the major currencies. And then when you look against the Japanese yen, you will see that again we are still in the 8 region, again still trading stronger.
All right. Mr. Sbiya, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time today. Hopefully, we'll connect for an extended period in the next days. Thank you so much for providing your insights. We've come to the end of our program of today. See you again tomorrow on Business Watch. Have a good day.